Hi everybody, this is Tina from Rehatch Designs, and we are here for a Tim Holtz Tuesday. Hope everybody's doing well. We're going to be doing something with the abandoned paper. The paper line is really great. It has a lot of mixed media looking pages to it that are very different, and I love using them as a background. Right now what I'm doing is I'm showing you these Finnabar rust effects, and I was going to use these, but I'm not going to be able to. You're going to see later that I don't. And then also some patina, some salvage patina distress ink. We will be using that. Okay, I have a bunch of chipboard out and some wood pieces. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a rust effect on this without the rust effect. We're going to kind of make our own. And what I'm doing there is I'm just putting down some texture paste. And I'm just going to kind of randomly put that all over my pieces. And there's really no rhyme or reason. It's basically just to add texture to this. And it's really pretty random, and you can put it on anything. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some embossing powder. You could use any kind, it doesn't really matter, or you could use sand. Anything that you can mix with glue that has that gritty texture to it. I'm happy using this just because I have it on hand. I have some sand, would be a lot cheaper, but anyway, I'm using this, and that's how you can make your own little grit paste. Anyway, so I just mixed it with some tacky glue because it's nice and thick. You don't want the glue or whatever you mix it to be too watery. So I'm just mixing up some more, and I'm basically smearing it over most of my piece. There's really no way you can screw this up, honestly, guys. It just, you're not going to see any of this really when it's done. And I use the brown because, you know, we're going to be brown over it, but for the most part you can use clear, any color you want. It'll all do the same thing. Okay, so now that I've done all that, I'm going to make sure I dry it really well. Make sure you don't get too close with your embossing gun because then you'll melt the texture paste, and you don't want to do that. So now I have some plain brown craft paint, any kind will work. And I'm stippling my brown paint on, which basically is going up and down with my brush. And that's just going to add more texture to it. It's kind of a stiff brush. And I'm going to do that on all my pieces. And now I'm going to add some black. Because I want a darker brown. And I want a little bit of the black showing through. So I'm mixing that up. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on my pieces. Kind of randomly all over. And I'm doing it while my brown paint is still wet. And that's really the key to doing this to make it look real is kind of blending your different colors together. And doing it while the other paint is wet helps do that. So now I'm getting my other colors ready to go. But I decide I'm going to go ahead to take a little bit more brown. And I'm going to kind of smush it in with the black just to kind of, I don't know, maybe blend it a little bit more. And I kind of do that on all my pieces. And now I'm taking some yellow. And I'm kind of mixing it with what's on there because I really wanted more of a mustard yellow, but This has a little bit too much white in it, but that's okay. It's still going to work. If you have more of a mustard yellow, it would probably work a little bit better than this, but in the end, I think it turns out okay. So I'm just basically dabbing on the yellow in different spots. Again, while the paint is still wet. And now I'm going to take my orange, and this is really the right orange color. It's kind of a rusty orange look. And I'm actually dabbing that over the yellow so that the yellow blends in more, but yet it's not just a solid color. And that's ultimately what you're trying to achieve. You just don't want a solid color. And I'm just going to do that on all my pieces. And honestly, guys, we're not going to use all these pieces, but I don't know which ones I'm going to use yet, so I kind of do them all. And whenever you get your stuff out and you're going to do this kind of stuff, you might as well just go ahead and do it all at one time, or get a lot done anyway. So I decide I want a little bit more black and brown, and I want the little darker brown, so I'm going to mix that up and get it where I want it. I'm going to go back in and I'm going to go over the orange spots a little bit with the darker brown. And the reason it's good to just be mixing your colors as you go is you're never going to mix them the same. And having that variation in color is what makes it look realistic when you're done. Okay, so now that I've done all that, I've dried my pieces, and I'm going to take my Distress Oxide Salvage Patina, and this is really what brings this to life, guys, even though I think it looks pretty good the way it is. Now, this is a re-inker, so it's very concentrated. So it works a little different if you just use the pad, but I've done it with that, and it works the same with that. So I put some on in just varied spots and then kind of wipe some of it off. And I'm going to do that. And I think I'm going to use these 3 pieces. I've kind of made up my mind I'm going to do that. So after I've done all that, I'm going to just take my water and spritz it. And what that'll do is that activates the oxide ink, and it has that oxidized look, and that's what makes it really work and make this look so good, is that it will just kind of blend everything all together, and it looks very realistic when you get done. And just, add more, take it away, just kind of do what you think will look the best. It does blend in when you get done. So I did my other pieces too. But I want to show you, this is how they look when they're done, and I think it turned out fantastic. So you can do it without the kit. Also, I want to show you on the right is the one that you do with the kit, and the left is the one that we did. So I think they turned out pretty close. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our abandoned paper and we're going to rip it and make sure that I get it not perfect on any of the edges. And I'm going to go ahead and ink all of that up also. And I use the ground espresso because I want kind of a dark look. So I will be doing that on all the edges. Kind of just deciding which way. There's really not that much of it going to show in the end, but so I'm going to go ahead and put my ground espresso on all of around my page. And now I'm just going to go ahead and glue that down. Now I'm just kind of deciding where I want my rusted pieces that we did to go. I kind of have an idea, but I'm not sure, and I'm not even sure what pieces I'm going to use. I have a lot of them laying around. Originally I thought I'm going to use this arrow or this arrow sign. Then I kind of looked through my stash, and I actually have a star, and that star I did with the rust effects. And if you look close, you really can't tell a whole lot of difference between that and the ones that I did. So now I've just kind of taken some different pieces of material that I have, and I'm using a Tim Holtz ticket booth photograph, and I'm kind of trimming the edges around that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to distress that up a little bit and distress up my piece of material. And that material is just a light cotton material that I have. I think it's an old hanky that I had cut up, and it's a piece of it. The other piece is more like a duck cloth that's a little heavier. And then I'm going to take my sentiments from Tim Holtz, Chapter 3, and I'm going to take one of those, and I'm going to use some ink, archival ink, and I think this is black soot, and I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that, my piece of material. And now I'm going to glue my material onto my, I'm going to glue my picture on my material, I mean. So now I'm going to go ahead and glue down all of my rusted pieces that we did. And I'm using my 3-in-1 glue here because I think it's a little bit stronger glue, and these are a little bit heavier objects, and also too there's maybe some bumps and stuff. I have people all the time asking me whether I like the 3-in-1 or the art glitter glue. I like them both, and I get them both, but I use them for different reasons, so you know, they're different. Okay, so now I'm going to put my 2 down, and I decided I have some black string leftover. I always save my leftover strings when I'm sewing. And I'm going to put that behind the 2. And I decide I'm going to go ahead and put some of that behind the star. And there's really no right or wrong way to do this. It's just gather it up, put it on. And at first I try and use the art glitter glue. And I think it would work if I held it there long enough, but I wanted something to work faster. So I took the 3-in-1 glue and decided to glue it down with that. Yeah, I think I like that. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and put my 2 down. You know, and doing that rust effect is a great way to get rid of all those old chipboard pieces and stuff that you don't want to use. I went ahead and sewed around the ticket booth picture, and I did kind of a sloppy circle and left the strings. I thought that having that black thread there would blend in with the 2 and the star. And so then I went ahead and I did a little bit of sewing on the sentiment, and I'm going to glue that down on our little rusted piece on the end there. And I think that's it. I think it turned out pretty good. It's pretty cool. So that one is done. And now we're on to the next one. And it is going to be with, again, another of our pages from our book. And underneath is this scrapbook paper that I have. It's just an orangey color, kind of a mixed media look. It's not a Tim Holtz, but it works really well with this kind of thing. Again, the great thing about pulling out having these pages is that we've sewn all the way around them, and we can use the outside part as a frame. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm using the leftover piece of that abandoned that we used on our other page, and I'm basically going to use the more turquoise part of that page, and I decide how I want it on there. And I'm just going to glue the two pieces together, because again, it's going to be a backdrop for what we do next. Okay, so now that I'm just going to glue these pieces down, it really doesn't matter. You could put them upside down, but it just so happens that the wording is right side up on this, but it wouldn't make any difference. We're going to be covering up most of this anyway, so. And I'm overlapping them a little bit. Okay, so then my next step is going to be, I am going to use some corrugated cardboard, and I got this in as packing. It's not really super heavy, that's why I like it, but I mean, you can use any kind of corrugated cardboard. You can get it, rip it from a box or whatever, but I like this. This was in some dishes that I bought, and I was more excited about the cardboard than I think the actual dishes. But anyway, I'm just kind of making it into kind of a rectangle and making the edges kind of rough. And I'm getting out our paint that we used before to make our rust, because we're going to use it again, which is basically the same colors that we used before, the yellow, the orange, the black, and the brown. And I'm taking a brayer out, and I just have a little acrylic block there because I'm going to mix my paint on that. And I also have some metallic luster. This stuff that I have is actually kind of dried up, but I use it kind of more like a paint. I put a little water in it and mix it, and for my purposes it'll work, but any kind of type of shimmer or metallic paint that you have would work. This is basically two different colors. It's black shimmer, and it's also silver and silver spark, and this is by Deco Art, and I really like these, except they did dry up, but I actually use the kind in a tube now because I think it lasts longer, but I still use this stuff because honestly it works really well as a paint when you add a little water to it. It just doesn't have that cream to it anymore to kind of buff it on. So anyway, I put the light color on first, and now I'm putting the dark color on top of it just to give it some variation. And what I'm going for here is I'm kind of trying to make this look like a piece of tin. So well, now I'm going to take a little of my brown paint, a little of my black paint, and I'm going to go ahead and try and get those two mixed together a little bit, but I don't want it completely mixed. And I'm going to use my brayer to go over the corrugated part of this, and that's just so I don't get on the inside. I don't want to get too much of the silver covered, because if I do, then in the end you won't be able to tell that it's, you know, supposedly a piece of tin. So I'm just taking a little bit more of the brown, and I'm smushing it in a few of other places just to kind of grunge it up a little bit. Now I'm going to take my orange, and I'm basically going to mix it. And again, you want to do this when your paint's still kind of wet, because you're kind of smearing them all together. And this is a great way to get that look. And if you'll notice, when we're doing this, we're not adding any kind of texture paste or texture to it other than just the corrugated part of it, because honestly, because it's the corrugated, has a lot of texture in it already, but you could certainly do that if you wanted to. You could add that and make it even more realistic. But I am doing just this just because I think it's enough for this when, you know, we do have the corrugated part going on there. So now that it's completely dry, I'm going to go ahead and take my salvage patina distress oxide, and I'm going to go ahead and use that. This time I'm going to put water in it because I want it to be really drippy. And I'm going to put that on in different spots all over. And there's really, again, no right or wrong way how to do this. It's really to taste. And I'm going to kind of put that all over. And then I'm going to take my water again, and I'm going to spray it, and I'm going to let it drip. And of course, it not only drips, what it will do is it oxidizes, has that oxide look. And now I'm taking my leftover salvage patina oxide ink, and I'm going to go around the edges of my paper, and that's just to kind of tie the whole thing in all together. So I'm going to make sure that's all dry, and now I'm going on to the other part of our project, and I'm getting some crackle paste. It's called Distress Crackle Paint, and it's clear rock candy. And I'm putting a coat on this, and later on I'll actually put a lot more on. I'll put like 3 coats and more on the edges because I want it to look very distressed. But I'm letting that dry, and I'm going to go ahead and take my piece or tin piece that we did, or cardboard piece, and I'm going to glue that down. Oh, and the piece that I put the Distress Crackle Paint on, that is a Tim Holtz, one of his items too. I'll list that in the description box too, so that you guys can get those if you want them. They're all of his black and white pieces. I forgot what it's called. So pretty much on this, I'm going to let it dry. It's better if you let it dry naturally than if you heat dry it. It tends to do well. And I'm going to use one of the chipboard pieces, and its hope is never lost. And I'm basically going to put the crackle paste on that, let it dry. And now I'm just taking some vintage photo distress ink that I've watered down, and I'm going to go ahead and put that over the top, and it's going to give it a very distressed look, and it's going to go in all the cracks, and that's what I'm wanting. I want a really distressed look on this flower. Somehow I want it to look like it's like rising out of the ashes, kind of a thing. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and dry this a little bit, and I go ahead and put my sentiment on a piece of burlap and glue it all down. And eventually I take it off and I pop it up on some dots, and then I put a little bit more distressing on the edges of the flower, just because I want it to be more distressed, but pretty much that's all I do to this. Okay, so now we're on to the next one, and this last page I'm using a Tim Holtz paper, and we're going to go ahead and put these birds on there, but we're not going to just glue them on, of course not. And so what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to go ahead and dip these birds, and these aren't Tim Holtz, they're just I don't even remember where I got them, and you could do this with anything, it doesn't have to be any birds. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm just putting this in some Versamark and get it all nice and saturated. And you guessed it, we're going to emboss it. But I'm using the thick embossing powder. And I'm going to actually end up doing this 3 different times. And it's really important that you do it multiple times to get this effect. You'll see what we're doing in the end, but you really kind of have to have at least 2, if not 3 coats on. And I end up doing it 3 times. So you're going to go through and do each step and go ahead and heat it up. And then you're going to, again, you're going to put it in your Versamark or whatever. Use your dabber or whatever you have. And you're going to do it again. So after you've done it 3 times, then what I did is I took some distressed embossing glaze, and that's antique linen, and I am going to dip this in antique linen. And the antique linen, at first you're going to think, oh my gosh, I ruined it when you dip it in, because it'll completely cover whatever you're doing. But because it is you can translucent, you're going to see when you're done, it just adds this really nice antique look to it. I really love this stuff. I use it a lot. Okay, so now we're going to just go ahead and emboss that, and I'm taking those pieces after I did it and letting them get completely cold. You don't want them, not cold, but dry and cold. And what I showed you there is I have some of Tim Holtz chipboard pieces, and we're going to use one of those. Now I have a sentiment piece, and that is from the chapter 3. And I'm going to go ahead and take that, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp on a piece of tissue paper, just plain old tissue paper. And I'm going to let that dry. So now I'm going to take that chipboard piece, and it's a little bit too thick for me. And honestly, in the end, you could have used anything. I thought some of this was going to show around the edges, but it really didn't in the end. I could have done that, but it just, the sentiment ended up covering most of it anyway. So now I'm going to take a piece of burlap, and I'm going to put it over that. And as I said, I end up having to cover most of it anyway, which I really didn't think I was going to, but I had to in order to fit everything on there. So I end up cutting it and just kind of fraying the edges a little bit. And you can kind of see the chipboard underneath the frayed edges, so I guess it wasn't a total waste, but I don't always know what I'm going to do when I'm doing it. I just kind of have an idea and I go with it, and sometimes it turns out, sometimes it doesn't. So it's like a lot of times when I'm doing things in layers, you're thinking, well, you're just going to cover that in the end, and I don't always know that it's going to be covered. So anyway, so I put that on there, and you'll notice there's a little black on that burlap, and that's because it's printed on the back, and I like that. I think it adds to the distressed look to it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out my tissue paper, and I'm not even trying to be straight, because in the end this is all going to blend into the burlap, and you're not really going to see much of the tissue paper when you're done. So I'm just going to glue that on there with some white glue or some Mod Podge or whatever. But I'm going to take a little distress ink, and I'm going to dab it on there a little bit. And later on, what's going to happen, that's going to blend. So now that my pieces that I embossed are done, what I'm doing is I'm going to deliberately crack them. And basically, you just bend them over and you crack them. And that will give it a very distressed look when you're done. And try and make the cracks go different ways. And the more cracks the better, the smaller the cracks the better. So I just do that all over, and I'm cracking them, and that's why you had to have so many layers. If you just do like one layer, it doesn't really crack as well. So the best thing to do here is just to put, I would say 3 layers on, and then of course we put the antique linen on top of it. So it's got quite a bit on there. Alright, so now that you've done that, you're going to go ahead and take some vintage photo, and I have the spray. You could use it from the pad. It doesn't really matter. And what I'm going to do with that is I am going to just take a brush and I'm going to go ahead and go over my birds with the cracks. And I'm especially going over the cracks. And I'm even opening the cracks a tiny bit just to get some of the ink in there. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to accentuate those cracks. So you can see all the little cracks and see where all of the pieces are all together there. So there you go. You can see how they're all cracked. And now I'm going to take that brown and go around my page, and I also use it to stipple on my piece of burlap, and I just kind of stippled on it with my brush, and what that did is it kind of blended in that whole sentiment to where you can't really see that much of the tissue paper. So now I'm just deciding where I want to put those birds and the sentiment. I'm done. Anyway, that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully I'll see you again soon with another installment of Tim Holtz Tuesday, and I'll see you with some other videos soon. Take care.